So I remember, I think you had sent an email, and I didn't get a chance to review your form this morning. But it's you have Gus. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Go ahead and fill me in on Gus.
So I adopted Gus in March from Chicago Canine Rescue. And so I think, yeah, he's a really good dog. And like, we've been doing like a class obedience training, and it's been good. And he's really good at like sit and stay and like doing tricks and stuff, but it just hasn't really translated very well to the real world. So like, essentially, he's not like wildly reactive. Like, we can walk by another dog across the street, or like even on the same side of the street if we kind of pull over, but it's just kind of one of those things where like it really compounds on itself. Like, if he sees a squirrel and then he sees a dog and then he sees another squirrel, it's like he can't really, you know what I mean? It's kind of hard for him to like get over it. Yeah. And then it'll kind of be the other thing where he like he usually won't like start a little barking fit with another dog, but if like another dog starts it, like he'll kind of, you know, have to bark back. And he has a really hard time with dogs behind fences as well. So yeah, it's just kind of like reactivity with other dogs, squirrels. I used to live by Jonquil Park, and we'd try to walk by the park, and he would have a really hard time as well with when there were dogs in the park running back and forth and he was walking on the leash. He like can't really, you know what I mean? He just gets reactive and starts like barking and kind of like loses focus of the walk entirely.
Sure.
And then the other thing on walks that I kind of wanted to work on is like, I think the reason other dogs are kind of starting barking at him is because he's just like very kind of intense with other dogs. Like, he'll be walking and like he'll see another dog from like 15-20 feet away, and he'll just kind of like, his tail will turn up and his forehead will get kind of wrinkly, and he'll just kind of like stare them down. And of course the other dogs are barking at him because it's just very intense. So I think it's just kind of finding ways to like kind of knock him out of the reactivity or the like being sort of intense around other dogs.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's like not every time it really is like dependent on like the temperament of the other dog, like how the rest of the walk has been. Like, usually the first 20 minutes of our walks are really good, and then after that is like when, you know what I mean, the like things have kind of compounded on each other, and then he is just a little bit crazy, or you know what I mean, just super tense and super wound up.
Yep.
But yeah, so that's kind of the main thing I wanted to work on.
Yep.
Kind of my goals are just to be able to like walk past another dog on the sidewalk without, you know what I mean, without like any drama happening.
A nice walk and not, you don't have to worry about them.
Yeah.
Sure.
Or also to be able to like hang out in a park with like dogs and squirrels and things running around and have him, you know, not be able to
just like be out and have a life.
Control. Yes. Yeah. So it's nothing like beyond, you know what I mean? It's nothing super crazy. Like, usually I can just take him away from the situation, distract him, and we do some like sit, stay, lay down, shake, like, you know, just to kind of get him to focus on something else. Then we reroute back on the walk. But I just don't think he really like understands like right and wrong to a degree. Like, I just think he doesn't really like have a word for, I don't think he really understands no. And that also kind of like crosses over at home as well. Like, he really loves to, you know, try to bite the vacuum cleaner and try to bite the mop. And, you know, I'll say no, but I just don't really think, you know what I mean? It's just not really translating to him. And the obedience class person that I was with was like, oh, just start slowly introducing him, like put treats around the vacuum, like leave the vacuum out. And I just kind of, I kind of feel like you should be able to tell a dog no in my mind. But so yeah, just those are like the two main things, just kind of like having a system of right and wrong, and then working on reactivity and like focus on walks.
Okay. I'm sorry. Some of the methods that are out there baffle me.
I mean, I think it would work great for like a golden retriever, but you know what I mean? Or just like a really beautifully tempered dog. But
yeah, which is a very, very, very tiny percentage.
Yeah.
you know, because dogs are prey driven,
Mm-hmm.
you know, squirrels, animals, birds, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Dogs don't know what the hell a vacuum cleaner is, so
Yeah. I mean,
you
I
know,
get it. It's like loud and it's in their face. I would bark at it too if I didn't like communicate.
right. Is there anything here about anything else about Gus you think I should know, or is that pretty much the overall?
That's pretty much the overall thing. He's been like a super fast learner in the class, and he really surprised me with how, like, I thought it would be a lot bigger of a deal for him to be around 5 or 6 other dogs, but he was really good in the class, really focused.
Yeah.
But I think it's just, you know, controlled environment versus real world.
Yeah. So before reaching out, I'm assuming you've done research on us and like read up on us and stuff like that. I say us, but it's really me still doing all the training. And it's my methods and stuff. So, you know, we use e-collar and prong collar.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to explain how all this stuff works. And then, you know, I train for real world environments and all that stuff. And, you know, yes, you can teach your dog the no word or whatever. So I'm assuming this class is strictly clicker or positive reinforcement based.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just treats.
Yeah. So the problem with reinforcement is that it's great for things you want to see again, but does not work for things you do not want to see again.
Yeah. That's exactly what we're running into.
And the other problem is a nice mug, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
The other problem is it doesn't transfer to the real world very well. So like you're like, he gets overstimulated. I got to step to the side, and then I got to refocus him, and then go for a walk, and then you know, a block later you see another dog, and it's like I'm not gonna do that.
Right. It's just it's frustrating after a while.
Yeah.
I would just love to go.
And the reason why that doesn't work either is, well, one, food tends to overstimulate dogs or stimulate them already, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like if he's stacking on, I saw a squirrel and I saw dogs and this dog barked at me, there's a dog behind the fence and he's already up here. And then you're like, hey, come over here, buddy. He's either too stimulated, he's not going to care, or you're just adding more stimulation, you know, so you're just taking him to the next degree and you're not doing anything to stop or disrupt the escalation.
Yeah.
Okay. The reactivity towards reactivity is completely normal. It can be addressed. Okay.
Great.
But you know, it's nothing out the ordinary. I really feel like your dog is just overstimulated, and that's where all the reactivity is coming from.
I think so too.
Yeah. So for dogs, you know, there's whenever they like express an emotion, if you will, you know, whether it be anxiety, fear, nervousness, or stimulation, it's usually through their mouth. So licking, chewing, barking, biting, nipping, panting. So in this case, barking, right? Because he's so wound up, he's so frustrated, it has to have an outlet, and then that's where it's coming out. Okay. So that's just dogs being dogs. There's nothing wrong with that. Going over the concept of right and wrong. So this is a human concept. Okay. How dogs learn is not so much right and wrong. It's more so what can I do and what can't I do. Okay. What do I do that garners a correction, and what don't I do that does not garner a correction, you know?
Yeah.
So, and which is kind of where that no concept comes into play. You know, and then of course we know what no means because we're humans. Unless you empower the word, it means nothing.
Okay.
Like he's not by definition understanding the word no.
Yeah.
Right? It's just a sound that you make, like you're just barking at him. Okay. And so you can teach the no. It's just, you know, I've seen people on the streets, like literally, like the dog will be lunging and they'll pull them aside and they'll like sit them down. And they'll go, no, you don't do that. That's bad. That's a bad dog, right? And I'm sitting here like, you are crazy. If you're communicating to your dog that way and expecting your dog's going to learn, dog has no idea what's going on. Okay. So it's very simple. And like the attacking the vacuum and the mop thing is very, very simple. Okay. So I was raised old school. I was spanked. And so if I didn't do my homework, if I talked back to my mom, if I didn't clean my room, it was spank, spank, spank. Okay, one consequence for a multitude of behaviors to either deter me from doing certain things or to motivate me to do certain things like get good grades. My mom was very strict. So for dogs, if Gus did something to another dog, like let's say he was like trying to mount them, for example, okay,
Mhm.
they didn't like it. How do you think they would stop him?
They would like bark and kind of snap, probably.
Yeah, or possibly just even bite them, like
Yeah.
want to nip or bite, make contact,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Dogs bite each other. That's how they establish their rules and boundaries. Okay, so
Mhm.
they're physical animals. They use physicality to establish these things and teach things. So like you can go on YouTube and you can look up like, a mother dog corrects her puppies.
Yeah.
And you'll see her biting and nipping at the puppies. And you'll see the puppies whining and crying and running away. And she's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
So that's dogs. The whole like timeout thing, like put your dog in a crate, does not work. That's a human concept. Go to your room, think about what you just did, because we can
Right.
reflect. Dogs do not reflect.
Right.
Okay.
They're just
So,
in a room. Yeah.
right. So timeouts work in the sense that the dog may de-escalate if you're removing them from a very stimulating environment, or they stay static and then it actually gets worse because now all that energy is contained in a little box and then it has to come out somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The like positive reinforcement method of like tell your dog no and then redirect them to a toy or a treat or whatever does not work because nothing ever said don't do that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. That's probably what they've taught you. Like
Mm-hmm.
pull them
Just
away
to
and like, redirect them with something.
have something that's more interesting. But it's
Yeah.
kind of like a walk where it's like, I don't think like a hot dog or a rope toy is going to be better than like
Mhm.
bark,
Well, dogs are living, I don't know, 23 hours out the day in the home, most likely.
Yeah.
So that 1 hour out the day where they're, going for a walk, screw the rope toy.
Right.
I can get that any other day.
Yeah.
Right? I can get
Totally.
that in the house. So, or food, you know,
Right.
like if he's like, yeah, I know you got chicken, but there's a squirrel and I'm into hunting squirrels, you
Right.
know,
It all makes perfect sense. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm not opposed to positive reinforcement. I use it. I use it for
Mm-hmm.
puppies under 6 months for really simple stuff. And I always tell my dog owners, cause I'm amazed that like nobody even like calls this out, but I always, even like way back when I would tell people like, hey, this is positive only. Don't expect a whole lot. Like I just said it, I set the bar low right off the bat because I'm like, it's not going to be effective in the real
Yeah.
world where you have a puppy. It's super simple stuff. And then once they hit a certain age, then we do big boy training or big
Mm-hmm.
girl training. Okay,
Yeah.
that's effective outside in real life. So I think everybody's kind of misled thinking that they can get things done using only food. And
Mm-hmm.
it is super rare to have a dog that will retrain well with food in any environment. Um, but then I'm always skeptical because then I go, okay, well, great, the dog does fairly well, but what happens if someone like blows up a firework and scares it?
Yeah.
Your food
Yeah.
goes out the window now.
Right.
Okay, and that's the stuff that I think about because those are the things that whenever anybody's ever told me like, hey, I really need to fix this, it's like really crazy things, and I'm like, okay, like that's the real world.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
So that's why e-collars and prong collars exist, and that's why I use them. Okay. Now, prong collars I use very rarely. What kind of dog is Gus, by the way?
He's a boxer beagle mix,
Okay.
is what they
Okay.
said, but he's just like a beefy, like 52-pound or 55-pound dog with like the colorings of a beagle. So,
Sure.
yeah.
So prong collar I don't use as much anymore
Okay.
because it takes a lot of technical skill
Hmm.
for the owner, and people tend to tense up and always have their hands up because they're used to their dog pulling. And since the prong collar is a lot of leash work, people tend to lock up.
Okay.
So I don't really use it unless I'm working. Like I had a client who was probably 90 pounds. She was super petite and she had a 150-pound Great Dane. So it was e-collar and prong for her because she needed as much leverage as possible. So I do all my dogs are over 6 months are trained on the e-collar. Okay. For a number of reasons. One of them is it gets off-leash reliability right off the bat. Okay. In my opinion, it's the best training tool because you get off-leash reliability. Food, again, very low ceiling. Prong collar, better, but once you remove the leash, the dog knows you don't have connection anymore, so they can, go. So e-collar is the only tool that will still have communication up to a mile, depending on the model that you get. Okay. So I'm like, why would I waste my time with anything else? It's very simple. The concepts are very, very simple to teach. And because of COVID, everything's verbal instruction now. So pre-COVID, I would work with the dog so the owner would observe to learn what we're trying to teach, and then I would give it to the owner, and then I would coach them. Okay. But to minimize contact now, I just coach the person through everything. Okay. And it's been doing really, really well. Everybody's been loving it. Because one, I'm getting the same results that I would get even if I did work with the dog myself. Okay. Every time. Two, we're outside in the real world. We train at Oz Park. Are you familiar with Oz Park?
Yeah. I've taken him there before and tried to train there with the treats, but he just gets overstimulated. Yeah, so I think it'll be good.
Busy. Okay, so we train at the busiest park in Chicago. Okay, so right off the bat, you're learning how to apply the training methods in a realistic environment. Okay,
great.
And then if you can do it there, doing it back home should not be an issue. Three, since I'm coaching you and I'm not doing anything with Gus, you're learning everything from the get-go, right? So like, I already know how to train dogs. I already know how to deal with dogs with behavior issues. I already know how to train dogs with behavior issues. It doesn't matter to me to like train your dog. It matters to you, right? So you're the one that's going to need all the know-how and the skills. So in the beginning, the first class is typically the hardest, the first half of it, because you don't know what you're doing. Gus doesn't know what you're doing. He doesn't know what he's doing. And you got to figure it out as I coach you, right? But once it clicks for the dog, it is smooth sailing.
Great.
Okay. And then once it clicks for you and you see what we're teaching, you're like, oh, wow, this is actually effective and it's working. And then by the end of the session, we want Gus to already be walking at your side, no tension, with the completely slack leash. Okay. Great. Then it's your job to practice it and reinforce it for the week. And then I see you the next week and then we build on that. Okay. And we've been recording everything for a couple of reasons. One is because it is all verbal instruction, it is a ton of information.
Yeah.
Is that if you forget anything, you just go and find Gus's video and you go to the point that you forgot or you watch it again.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're struggling with something, in particular, I can go, hey, watch this video. This is another client who's having the same problem and we got it addressed. You can use this as a reference. Okay. So it's like kind of like a database of information.
Yeah. I've watched a couple of them. They look, yeah.
And the other thing is it just shows people one day, because people look down on e-collar because of what they think it is and how it's used. Because of the old school method of training, old yank and crank type of stuff. So it's come a long way in the last like 20, 30 years of dog training. So it's completely uncut, it's raw, and people can say like, oh, okay, like I saw this dog in a real world environment go from crazy to
right. Yeah, that's part of the reason why I called. Yeah, I was like, these dogs that are like 10 times worse than Gus are like better than Gus in one session.
Yeah. And the reason why it's so effective is because dogs are physical animals. Okay. So e-collar is physicality, and we're doing it appropriate to the dog. So size, breed does not matter to me. Temperament does not matter. So someone can say like, I have the softest dog, Jesse, right? Like they're going to be super low in the collar, and the dog is being very high because they're physically tough. They may be emotionally weaker, but they're physically tough because they're meant to bite, So, and the owners will be freaked out because they keep seeing their dog as a soft animal, and their dog's on 65. I'm like, but your dog's not yelping. Your dog's not rolling on the ground. Your dog is focused, paying attention, and calm, right? but it's the psychology of the human, because they keep seeing the dog as a soft, weaker animal. And I'm like, no. Dogs bite each other. Dogs are jerks to each other in a natural habitat. If you go to the dog park and there's a bunch of dogs and then one dog gets out of line, a lot of times you'll see all the dogs just charge that one dog and start barking and like nipping at them. They regulate each other. As humans, we have cops and laws and stuff, right? So we don't really regulate each other like primal animals do. We call the authorities and stuff. But in their world, if somebody steps out of line, they take care of it themselves, and they use physicality. So in Gus's case here, this is a pretty standard case for me. It seems like overstimulation. So the way we go about it is, and if you've seen, did you watch like Lake's video?
I don't remember the dog's name. I think so.
And it was inside a building, and it was like she was very reactive. It was a pit bull.
Oh yeah, I think so. There was inside, and then it was outside afterwards, right? I think I watched. I think so.
So you probably watched either, if you watched the full video, or I made like a shorter highlight video on it, right?
I think I watched. I don't remember. I think I've clicked around in a couple of them.
Yeah. But I'm pretty sure because you did see it, because it was inside and then we were outside.
Okay.
So that dog was labeled aggressive by another trainer and told to be put on Prozac and all that stuff. And we did the one class, and the dog 180'd within the class. And then by the next class, we went from my facility, which is not real, because it was that couple of weeks ago when that big storm came through.
Yeah.
So that we couldn't meet at Oz, so we met over there. Not over there, at my facility. And then on the second class, we met at Oz. And I was assuming there's probably going to be a little bit more work to do here, because they didn't get the outside experience. Right. And they show up and the dog's great, and part of her problem was anxiety, and the other part of the problem was overstimulation. So most other trainers would be like, okay, like when your dog lunges and barks, you're going to punish them for the lunging and barking, which is an approach. Okay. But it's not my first approach. The first approach is always teaching the dog a formal heel of my style, which is if I take one step, they take one step, I take 5 steps, they take 5 steps. When I stop, they automatically sit. And this with a completely slack leash, and I don't care what the environment is. When you have that level of focus, it resolves, like most of the time, 70% of the issues. Okay. Which is what happened with like Lake. Hers was even more. It was just a quick boom, 180. And I was like, and that when I get that quick of a turnaround, I go, that dog wasn't even aggressive in the first place, because it was so quick. I get dogs that, it's a process. Like it's every week, like they're aggressive and they're biting and they're attacking and stuff. And it's a process before we finally get them to like cut the crap. So when dogs turn around that quickly, I go, a lot of it's just stress and like overstimulation, and they don't know what to do, because the world isn't what it's supposed to be. Like dogs aren't supposed to be in a house with us on a leash with the collar, eating food, a guaranteed meal every day type of stuff. They're not meant for that. They're not even meant to be dogs. They're meant to be, wild wolves and stuff. We domesticate them and eventually created dogs. So that's where a lot of issues come from, is that one, people don't treat dogs like dogs, but then also the world isn't what it's supposed to be. So for them, it's very stressful, to have cars flying by, all these trains and fireworks and loud noises. There's some construction going outside my facility right now. Like all these things, for them, it's stressful. So what I do is I teach them, through with the heel command is formal discipline. So it's not so much the obedience, it's the discipline from the collar that reinforces the obedience, that actually impacts the behavior. Okay. Because if it was the obedience, then you wouldn't be calling me right now.
Yeah.
Your tricks, you're sitting down stuff, whatever, that's obedience. Like you would be fine with Gus. But it's because there's no discipline with that obedience, or dog discipline, because then people argue like, well, I reinforce it and that's discipline. I'm like, well, dogs bite each other. That's what you have to understand. Is discipline for a dog is that they bite each other. Okay. Like I was spanked. So it's that physicality aspect of it that settles them down. And then I go, what does that fix? Okay. Because the reactivity isn't the issue. What's the issue?
It's the lack of the discipline, the lack of like focus, and the
Lack of focus.
overstimulation.
Yes, the overstimulation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when I get dogs that bite people or dogs or whatever, people just go aggressive dog. And I go, but what's behind it? You know, so like
Yeah.
if a dog is barking at me and stepping backwards, I know the dog is scared of me. So if I go to touch that dog, the dog's probably going to bite me, but that would be fear aggression. That's not aggression.
Mm-hmm.
The dog was scared and it's going into self-preservation mode. It's like, no, stay away. Boom, I'm going to protect myself, right? Self-defense. So I don't label that an aggressive dog. That's a scared dog. So we got to work on the fear if we're going to get rid of the aggression, because that's where the aggression is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in your case, just like with most of my cases, I'd start off with the leash walking or the heel, class 1.
Okay.
And then class 2, I go, how did it go? You know, what did it fix? And you may say like, Jesse, reactivity's gone down a lot, but he's still barking at dogs behind fences or dogs that bark at him. And I go, that's normal. Because with reactivity, there's a spectrum, and reactivity towards human is almost always the first thing that goes away. So like, you know, runners, bikers, skateboarders, stuff like that is almost always the first thing that goes away. Then calm dogs, then like excited puppy type energy, other reactive dogs, and then dogs behind fences, and then like sudden run-ins with dogs, if that's a problem.
Yeah. Okay, that
Right.
makes perfect sense, because it's only puppy energy when he's already, like, he only is like bothered by puppies when he's already run into like 2 squirrels, and then otherwise it's like that like tier system makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So typically, people and calm dogs is like the first thing that goes. Then it's like the excited energy is kind of in the middle. But the other 2 reactive dogs or sudden run-ins they'll take the longest, because one, if the other person has a reactive dog, they typically want to remove themselves from the situation as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Right. So then if they leave before you settle Gus, he thinks his barking made them move. Yeah. So then you don't get that. You don't, you know, it works against you. With sudden run-ins with dogs, you can't plan that. You turn a corner dog, right? And so it simply takes longer. It doesn't mean that they can't be addressed. Right. And if you have dogs behind fences, it actually works to your benefit, because you have a controlled context and you can repeat it. So if I have a client that lives by, you know, that lives in a neighborhood with dogs behind fences, I'll tell them, like, utilize that to your advantage. And I want the client to leave with their dog passive when they're walking past those dogs, because that's the last thing they remember. Okay, if the last thing he remembers was I was lunging and barking, then the next time he sees that fence or whatever, he's going to go to lunging and barking.
Yeah.
Okay, so if the last thing he remembers is I was passive, it's not that he won't escalate, but it's going to take time from the build, which you can stop before he actually gets that, like, you know, the next level.
Yeah.
And then that kind of stacks on each other. So then the sudden run-ins with dogs is the hardest part. And I teach you how to handle that stuff. It's more so because there's dog training, which is training the dog. Then there's handler training, which is training you. So for me, what makes me an effective dog trainer is that I can come into a situation and regain control, no matter what it is. Okay, with e-collar or no e-collar, like I'll get the situation back under control because I have very good handling skills. So I teach you everything that I know you're going to need, and it's not always going to pertain to Gus. A lot of it's going to pertain to you. How you use your leash, what you're going to do when you see a situation. You know, most people tend to panic, you know, and then I work them through it, and I tell them, like, this is what you want to do. You want to, like, so like when I get other reactive dogs, everybody tends to cross the street or go the other way. And I'll tell them, once we start the training process, you want to start confronting it and putting yourself in those situations, because what you end up doing is, I have like a system of things that I have people do. So if they're putting themselves in a situation, they're already in, like, how'd you say, doing the system, right? And preparing themselves. And what they're actually doing is building force of habit. Is
Okay.
when I come into a situation, I just do these things automatically, so that if they turn a corner and they see that random dog, they're already going into that mode of, oh, I've done this 100 times in controlled contexts.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like having a fire escape plan and practicing it and hoping there's never a fire.
Right.
No, you're just getting those habits down, and then because you're not going to be perfect, you're going to be panicking because there's an actual fire, but you have a baseline and you've rehearsed it, so you think more clearly. Okay.
Yeah.
So so all that stuff is simple. So then by class 2, you would let me know, and I go, okay, if we need to tweak anything, here's the other stuff. I teach the second half of heal, and then on class 3, you dictate how things, or Gus's progress dictates how things progress.
Great.
Okay? So if he's doing great and the reactivity is going well and he's settling down just through discipline, then we just continue with control. Okay. So the two things I always prioritize are the heal and the recall. Come and call.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, the most important things. Those are usually 2 classes apiece. Okay.
Okay.
So then and that's if everything's going as it should. And then class 5 and 6 is typically, depending on the client, stationary control. So like, let's say you want to take them to a restaurant patio and not have them move for a while. You can have them sit there, or not sit there, but lay down, and he won't move for an hour and a half, 2 hours or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's super easy to teach. And the last class is typically like an overview, like reviewing everything that you've learned, unless there's something else you want to learn specifically. And then I teach you how to progress your recall to off-leash reliability. Okay. So I always stress recall being off-leash reliable, because then it's like pointless to even try to teach it. But it takes people the longest to teach, because it requires you to go somewhere where you'd have space for Gus to be free. Okay. But then also you want to practice with distractions like squirrels and things like that, and calling them away from them. So that's why it takes longer for people to cover, because if they don't live nearby a park, they got to drive somewhere. Right. And let's say they drive somewhere and it's like super empty and there's nothing going on. Well, now you don't have distraction.
Yeah.
Okay. But you'll have the tool set to practice, to get them to that point. How long that takes you is just depends on how much you're able to work with them.
Yeah.
Question so far?
Yeah. So I saw on your website you had the 3 class thing that focuses on reactivity. I think that's a little more in my budget. Do you think that would be not as productive? Like, what is your thought on that?
No, you could, if all you care about is the reactivity, you can do the 3 classes.
Okay. I think that's probably more what I'm interested in, because I feel, I think once I like have the tools to understand the e-collar, I can maybe try and go forward on my own and then call you guys again if I need to, do like a refresh. But I think the reactivity is kind of the main thing that I want to address.
For sure. So yeah, so the way that would work is it's the same process, except we really just focus on the leash walking and the reactivity. Okay. Great. Now, if, let's say he 180s after the first class, heal is a 2-part, there's 2 lessons to it, because there's 2 halves to it. And then by the 3rd class, if everything's going great, I don't care. We could teach something else.
Great.
Obedience wise. I could touch on the recall, but because you get the first half of it. The second half is important, but it's not the most important.
Yeah.
But you could get the first half of recall if everything is working well.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you're still like struggling with a couple of things on the 3rd class, we would review everything, and then I would give you all the options on how to squash the reactivity. Okay. Cool. How long it's going to take, like if that happens, let's say you're still struggling with it. Almost always when it comes to reactivity, when the owner is struggling, it's because they're not going high enough on the collar.
Okay.
That's the most common thing that I see. Okay. I do get dogs from time to time. I get about 2 to 3 a year who are so reactive, and just like, it's so like, they're just so loopy that the owner can stop the reactivity. Okay. They can stop it, but the dog won't retain it. Okay. So like, you'll stop it, and then 30 seconds later, a new dog blows up again.
Yeah.
Okay. It's super rare. It's usually bully type breeds, like pitties and more power breeds. Otherwise, as long as the owner does what I tell them, we stop it. Okay.
Yeah. I don't think he's on that level. It's never really
Doesn't sound like it. It sounds like
beyond
that's an
repair.
overstimulated dog.
Yeah.
But I've learned that just like I put information out there so that
Hmm.
people kind of know what they're going into.
Yeah.
So that this way they're not like taken off guard if it's, if for whatever reason
Yeah.
they're struggling. Because I've had that happen. Again, it's super rare. But usually these are very super reactive dogs. In your case, I don't expect it, but it's kind of like just FYI.
Yeah. Good to know. Yeah.
Oh, the vacuum and mop thing is an easy thing too. I'm not worried about that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not
Okay.
super worried either. I really think it's just kind of getting a new sort of like system and philosophy for like working through everything. You know what
For
I
sure.
mean?
Yeah, no, for sure.
I think it's probably more on me than on the dog at the end of the day.
Yeah,
So I, yeah,
I
I
mean,
need to get working on it.
yeah. Dogs are easy. Humans have made things really complicated. So like, because one dog would just bite another dog to resolve an issue.
Hmm.
Problem is that one dog might belong to another person,
Yeah.
and now we have property and we have liability and we have lawsuits and like all those other things, right? But in their world, like a dog would just kill another dog over a female, no problem. You
Yeah.
know, there's a video on YouTube that I posted up one time on my Instagram of a bunch of dogs, feral dogs, fighting over a female in heat in South America, I think. And I think in the end, like a Rottie or Rot type dog ends up just like eliminating all the other dogs and just like tearing them up, and they're all bleeding and stuff for possession of the female in heat. That's dog, but
Hmm.
nobody cares because they don't belong to anybody.
Yeah.
You know, so when it comes to the e-collar, one of the most common things I get is, or the question I get is, when does it go away?
Yeah.
And in my book, when you need it, I'm sorry, it doesn't when you need it. Okay, so there's like this saying like the dog should learn better and know what to do and what not to do and stuff, right? So my counter to that is, do you drive?
Yeah.
Okay, I've been on the expressway.
Not in a while, but yeah.
Okay, when you've been on the expressway, did you go the speed limit?
Mm, around the speed limit.
A little over, maybe.
Maybe so. Maybe so.
Okay, so I think it's funny that people expect dogs, to learn something over a short period of time or whatever,
Mhm.
either through food only or if you're using consequences, and they should learn it and just be a good dog. That doesn't
Yeah.
exist in their world. Okay, so if humans can't do it, because we have speed limits for a reason, but almost everybody on the expressway speeds.
Yeah.
Right now, if they see a squad car, what happens?
I slow down.
Right, because there's the possibility of getting a ticket.
Hmm.
Right. So as humans, we know better, and we know about the existence of laws, and that sign says 70, so
Right.
I should keep it under 70 or at 70, right?
Hmm.
Is if humans can't do it, I don't understand why they expect their dog to do it. It's opportunistic behavior, okay?
Yeah.
So when people can get away with something, and not everybody does this, um, if because when it comes to speeding, like everybody blows it off because it's like it's not a big deal. Is usually how that works, right? Um, but the law doesn't have a gray area. Like the law doesn't go like, oh, okay, like you're going to 75. Okay, it's not a big deal. The law is 70, right?
Mhm.
So with the e-collar, I look at it as a cop on a collar. When you know you're going to need him to behave himself, it's present. It doesn't mean you're always using it. It just means
Yeah.
it's present. Okay. It's present in case something happens, right? Because like, let's say you made great progress with everything. You're like, Jesse, I don't even need the collar. And then, 6 months later, you turn around the corner, there's a dog.
Hmm.
Like that still catches everybody off guard,
Right.
right? Is my goal here is that, you do the training, he cuts the reactivity, he's got very good, formal heel obedience, stuff that you need, and that maybe once in a blue moon, you have to address him.
Yeah.
Because he's a dog. Or for whatever reason, if he's being reactive, you have a means of stopping it. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's nothing good or bad. It has nothing to do with my skills as a trainer. It has nothing to do with like how much time you put into it, really. It
Right.
just comes down to opportunistic behavior. Okay. Are you familiar with what an e-collar is?
Just from your videos, not really beyond that.
Okay. Have you ever been to a chiropractor or physical therapist?
No.
Have you ever seen those videos where they recreate labor contraction pains in men?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that's what's called a TENS unit. Okay. There's like these little circle things, and they put on the muscle,
Mm-hmm.
and they run a slight current that moves the muscle. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, to recreate labor contraction pains, which are obviously very painful,
Right.
it's set very high. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's an e-collar.
Okay.
Okay. So e-collars,
Just like lower.
yeah, are miniaturized TENS units. Okay, because that's
Okay.
what that machine is called. It's called a TENS unit, TENS. And mine goes from 0 to 127 in divisions of 1. Other brands or cheaper brands will go to like 10 or 15, and 127 and 10 are the same. I just happen to have 117 more divisions. Okay, so I can fine tune it to the dog. The problem with those other brands are, one, if it's a cheaper model, they tend to be more along the lines of a shock, if you will. And the other ones, it's either you're too high and the dog's yelping, or you're too low and they're not listening. Okay, and I actually had that happen recently with the dog. The lady had her previous dog trained on it, on the collar, and it only had 7 levels.
Mm.
And then she wanted us to train her puppy on it. And I kept telling her, like, please, like, just get a regular collar. Like, just get a good collar. The dog was either yelping or not listening. It sucked so much. You know, because like, for me, that reflects on us.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm like, I know our methods of training are way better than this, but the tool itself. This is why I insist people just use Dogtra. Okay? Because it's the best brand. I've used it for years. I've had mine for 8 years, no problem. You know, it's an investment, but it's going to last a really long time. So you're not like electrocuting or like tasing your dog. It's just a muscle contraction. And the way we teach it is we always start low and we work our way up. Every dog's number is different. Your dog's number could be very low. Your dog's number could be very high. I don't know. Gus knows. And we figure all that out in the first class. Okay.
Okay.
I'll send you a couple of videos to watch prior to prep you.
Okay.
So that you learn how, you know what the device is, how to use it, how to fit it and everything. You won't use it until I work with you, but at least you come in already knowing what it is, so I can just teach you, like, this is how you use it.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions or concerns?
No, this is all sounding really good. It's good to know the technology behind it.
Yeah. People usually think it's a lot worse than what it actually is. And they also think the approach is a lot worse than what it actually is. So, you know, because when people tend to assume or jump to the negative, or always focus on the negative. And so, you know, when they see like a prong collar with the spiky looking thing, they're thinking, oh my God, like, you know, it's just puncturing the dog's throat and stuff. Like, if that was happening, it would not be out in production. Same thing with e-collars, because previously e-collars were called shock collars because the technology was not as good. They were also very minimal, like 5 settings, you know, so there was no real range in terms of intensity. They've come a long way in the past, 20, 30 years. They're perfectly safe to use. My 8-pound Chihuahua is trained on one. My Pitty is trained on one. Trying to think. I've trained dogs with heart murmurs and seizures, medical conditions. They're all perfectly fine because it's not electricity running through to the body. It's centralized to where the 2 probes is making contact. So it'll only move this area. Okay. Anything else? Hello?
Hi. Sorry, I think my Wi-Fi was being a little spotty for a second.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Anything else?
No, I think that's all making sense.
Okay. So then, the collar I'd recommend for you, and Maria will send you this information, is
Okay.
Dogtra, Dogtra, 2300 NCP.
NCP. Okay, got it.
Yeah, for knit constant page. That one runs about $287 with tax. Okay.
Okay.
It's pricey, but they last for years. So it's an investment, but it's a good investment.
Okay.
You may possibly be able to get away with the Dogtra 1900S. I don't know off the top of my head how much that one is, but I believe it is less expensive than the 2300. Okay.
Okay.
And the only difference is, I believe that the 1900 is a half-mile range and the 2300 is a three-quarter-mile range. They're both waterproof.
Okay.
And in my experience, the 1900 is a bit of a sharper, it's a sharper sensation, whereas the 2300 is more dull. So I feel like dogs, I've always used like three model types. And the 2300 is for me is smoother. It's more dull. The dogs accept it much more easily.
Right.
But I'm just giving you the 1900 option, just for budget reasons. So if you want to do your research and stuff and look into them,
I will.
I always recommend.
Great.
And then Maria will get in contact with you. You already know the length of time that you want to do, so that's not a problem. And then she'll handle any kind of scheduling and counting stuff. Anything else?
No. Last week Gus did the 3-day consultation with you, and we were emailing back and forth about him like jumping up on me at the end of the class.
Oh, that was you.
Yes, that was me.
Okay,
Sorry, I should have said that way earlier.
I forgot.
But I'm assuming that's the same thing. No. I'm assuming that's the same thing, just overstimulated.
I was overstimulated.
Too excited. Didn't know how to handle it. Yeah.
I completely blanked on that. So
yeah, sorry, I should have said that way earlier.
No, you're fine. So so the other client that was there, I think she missed because I had called my brother, who's the one that brought Gus for you, and he was like, oh, by the way,
I'm gonna jump closer to my Wi-Fi, I think.
Oh, sure. No, go ahead.
Hello.
Better?
Yeah, I hear you now. Sorry about that.
Okay. No, it's fine. So Corey, who's the gentleman that brought out the dog, brought Gus to you, is my brother. And I had called them to check in on something. And then he was like, oh, by the way, Caroline had said that Gus was like attacking his owner. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, he said there was blood. So I was like, crap. So then I'm rushing home. I'm rushing to the facility. And I played the video and I'm like, this just looks like an excited dog.
Yeah, he was just super excited. He jumped on my leg and scratched it a little bit, but it wasn't like, it was fine. He was just excited.
Sure. So I saw the video and I was like, well, let me just check just in case. But yeah, that was all overstimulation. So I actually saw or met Gus briefly here at the facility because I'm in and out with clients and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I completely forgot about that. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think you'll be fine with either or. But do your research and stuff with the e-collar. Anything else?
That's everything for me.
Yeah. And then from what I remember, I think he was fine here.
Yeah, he was totally fine. So he went on the pack walk. He went on 2 pack walks, and you said he was indifferent about other dogs, which
I think that's what I remember my employees telling me, which is not uncommon in the beginning.
Right. I think he was just he's kind of weird in like new spaces sometimes.
Yeah.
Like the vet and stuff. I think he's just kind of weird about it.
We get dogs that are like super social and stuff, and then the owner will drop them off and they're like super anxious. And then I tell them it's because your dog doesn't know they're going to dog daycare. Like You just like, your dog's like,
Right.
where am I, right? So that's why we do such a
Right.
long process for the evaluation, to ease the dog into it so it's less stressful.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Anything else?
That's everything.
Okay, awesome. So if you have any other questions, let us know. Otherwise, Maria will get in contact with you and get you all set up, okay?
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Take care.
You too. Have a good morning.
Bye.
Bye.